Although it may come as surprise to many, many of the European regions housed a considerable number of Muslims back in the day. One such region is Crimea. Speaking of, Crimea is basically a peninsula in Eastern Europe on the northern coast of the Black Sea. It now has a population of 2.4 million, made up mostly of ethnic Russians, with significant Ukrainian and Crimean Tatar minorities. However, there was a time when its population consisted mostly of the Crimean Tatars. If you're wondering who Crimean Tatars are, they're actually a Sunni Muslim ethnic group who speak a language descended from the Kipchak branch of the Turkic language family. In this video, we'll get you up to speed with everything that you need to know about Crimea, the Crimean Tatars, and why this peninsula is now considered the lost land of Islam in Europe. So to begin with, Islam was introduced in Crimea with the Mongol invasion of Rus in the 13th century. What happened was that in 1241, Genghis Khan's grandson, Batu Khan, conquered the region, establishing Mongol rule. However, over the upcoming decades, the region, which spread from Eastern Europe to the Korean peninsula, began to fragment. The western portion was ruled by a confederation of Turkic and Mongol tribes, which came to be known as the Golden Horde. In 1313, following the conversion of Özbek Khan, Islam became the state religion of the Golden Horde. In 1314, the following year, Crimea's oldest mosque, the Özbek Khan Mosque, was built in Stary Krim. The new overlords began intermarrying with native populations in both Russia and Ukraine and adopted Turkic dialects, as well as Islam as a religion. Moving on, with the passage of time, the Golden Horde began to fragment, as well as the Crimean Tatars eventually ended up forming their own independent Khanate in the late 15th century. Nevertheless, the Russian and Ottoman expansion from either side of the Black Sea kept the Crimean Tatars from asserting their independence. Ultimately, in 1774, the Treaty of Küçük was signed between the Russians and the Ottomans to ensure the Khanate independence. However, in 1783, Russians violated this treaty and annexed the territory. Proceeding ahead, the following Russian annexation, Crimea was again Christianized. The discriminatory policies lodged against the Crimean Tatars forced scores of them into neighboring states, including states that were part of the Ottoman Empire. Fast forward to the 20th century, the Soviets' collectivization efforts continued, which resulted in several famines in the 1930s and ultimately reduced the Crimean Tatar population. Then, in 1944, during the Second World War, after reclaiming Crimea from Axis powers, Stalin, who ruled over the Soviet Union at the time, accused the entire population of Crimea of collaborating with Nazi Germany. Consequently, he deported the entire nation into Soviet Uzbekistan as a form of collective punishment. According to the Human Rights Watch report from 1991, a woman recalls the aforementioned deportation in the following words: "At 3 in the morning, when the children were fast asleep, the soldiers came in and demanded that we gather ourselves together and leave in 5 minutes. We were not allowed to take any food or other things with us. We were treated so rudely that we thought we were going to be taken out and shot. Besides the locals, the officials were treated pretty much the same. For instance, those with government vehicles were allowed to drive to rail stations before being made to abandon their cars and join fellow Crimean Tatars on overpacked trains heading eastwards. It was not until 1983 that the Crimean Tatars were allowed to return to their homeland. It is said that in the 1920s, 471 Muslim communities were registered in Crimea, and during the years of exile, not a single one remained. Anyhow, after 1983, many Crimean Tatars returned to Crimea, but a sizable number continue to live in Uzbekistan to date. In 1989, though the Supreme Council of Crimea declared that the initially forced removals were illegal. Anyway, moving on. The Ukrainian census, held in 2001, recorded just under 250,000 Crimean Tatars, almost all of whom lived in Crimea. Surprisingly, they were just 10% of the whole population. This percentage included the Crimean Tatars, who had returned to Crimea after the long exile and turned into leaders in the local community. In 2013, Russia trespassed its boundaries once again by annexing Crimea. The annexation was justified on the basis that ethnic Russians formed the overwhelming majority of the population. However, many consider the peninsula has strategic importance for the Russians as the home of its Black Sea Fleet at Sevastopol. Ever since the takeover, Russians have been trying to silence the voice of the native Crimean community. The Russian government's official in Crimea has said, "Crimea returned to Russia forever." Anyone who advocates resistance is advocating bloodshed. Of course, we can't accept that and will react. Due to the fear of prosecution, many Crimean Tatars have been moving to other parts of Ukraine or Turkey, while others are adamant to stay in Crimea or Ukraine to resist the Russians. With Ukraine currently facing a Russian invasion, many of the Crimean Tatars have taken up arms against their arch-rivals. May Allah help the Muslim brothers and sisters in Crimea in these tough times, so that Islam may return to its former glory in the region. Ameen.